Sometimes life doesn't change in months or years, sometimes it changes in a single night. For me, it happened the night I shared a tent with my best friend, the man I thought I knew better than anyone. We were just two guys on a camping trip, carrying backpacks, cracking tired jokes, trying to breathe somewhere far from the noise of the city. But as the forest quieted and the fire faded to embers, something unspoken rose between us, something neither of us had ever dared to name. And by morning, nothing between us would feel the same again. Ethan and I had been friends for so long that remembering how it all began felt impossible. We met during our sophomore year of college, thrown into a group project neither of us took seriously. I still remember his dry humor, his steady calm while the rest of us panicked, and the way we ended up keeping each other awake through long nights and endless cups of coffee. After that, we were inseparable. Study sessions, late-night takeout, conversations about everything from philosophy to which superhero would win in a fight, somehow he became the one constant in a life full of change. Jobs came and went, apartments changed, relationships fizzled, but Ethan remained the person I could call at 2 a.m. when the world felt too heavy, the one who understood my silences as easily as my laughter. Maybe I always knew my feelings ran deeper than friendship, but some truths feel too risky to face. That summer, though, something inside me felt restless. My job drained me and the city felt suffocating, all noise, deadlines, and lights that never turned off. So when Ethan said, "Let's disappear into the woods for a few days, just you and me, no phones, no stress," I agreed before I could overthink it. I still remember the morning we left. He wore a faded blue t-shirt and cargo shorts, a baseball cap pulled low over his messy brown hair. A soft shadow of stubble framed his jaw, and when he smiled, half awake, holding coffee, something fluttered in my chest that I immediately ignored. "You sure you're ready for 3 days without Wi-Fi?" I teased as we loaded the gear. He smirked. "You say that like you can survive 5 minutes without scrolling." "Hey, I'm adaptable," I argued. "Sure you are," he replied, tossing his sleeping bag into the trunk. The 3-hour drive felt effortless. We argued over music playlists, grabbed gas station snacks, and shared long stretches of silence that never felt awkward. With Ethan, silence felt like space, safe, warm, and familiar. By the time we reached the trailhead, the sun hovered high above a sky as clear as glass. The air smelled of pine and earth, birds flickered through branches, gravel crunched under our boots, the forest wrapped around us like another world, one where city problems couldn't follow. "Man," I breathed, adjusting my pack, "this already feels better." He shot me a soft smile, the kind that always felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Told you wait until tonight." He led the way with an easy, confident stride, as if the woods belonged to him. I followed, trying not to stare at the way his shoulders moved beneath his shirt, the curve of his neck when he tilted his head back to look at the trees. Every time I caught myself looking too long, I scolded myself. He was my best friend, nothing more. The trail climbed higher, switchback after switchback, until my legs burned and sweat dripped down my back. Ethan barely looked tired. "You ever think," I panted, "that maybe you're secretly training for some survival reality show?" He laughed, warm, bright, easy. "No," he said, "but I like knowing I can probably outhike you any day." "Rude." "True," he added with a grin. The banter grounded me, but underneath it something kept shifting. Maybe it was the isolation. Maybe it was the way nature stripped everything down. But I couldn't ignore the undercurrent anymore, the warmth in his laughter, the way his gaze held mine a second too long, or the tightening in my chest every time he smiled. We reached the campsite just as the sky turned gold and violet. The clearing was perfect, flat ground, a stone fire ring, and a gentle stream nearby. We dropped our packs with matching sighs of relief. Setting up camp became its own rhythm. Ethan unfolded the tent with practiced ease while I fumbled with poles. "Wait, does this piece go here?" I asked, holding up a stray pole. He laughed softly and stepped beside me, his hand brushing mine as he took it. "No, genius, it goes here." The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent a spark through me that I tried to laugh off. Soon the tent stood steady and we gathered wood for the fire. Flames caught, casting a warm glow across the clearing. Dinner was simple, instant noodles cooked in a tiny pot, but somehow it tasted better under the wide open sky. When the stars finally appeared, scattered across the dark like powdered light, Ethan leaned back on his elbows and sighed. "Sometimes I think I could live out here forever," he murmured, voice soft and almost distant. I turned to him, my gaze lingering in the fire's glow. Shadows traced the lines of his jaw, softened the shape of his lips. Yeah, I asked, my throat suddenly tight. Yeah, no noise, no pressure, just breathing. And somewhere between the firelight and the silence, everything began to shift. I swallowed hard. Maybe that's why we're here, I said quietly, to learn how to breathe again. Ethan shifted slightly, his eyes meeting mine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The fire crackled softly, filling the silence, but beneath it, something else pulsed in the air, fragile and electric. A possibility, a question neither of us dared to ask. I wanted to reach out, to close that tiny space between us, to finally acknowledge what I had hidden for years. But before I could move, the fire snapped loudly, breaking the moment like a twig underfoot. Ethan looked away, a faint smile tugging at his lips as if nothing had happened at all. Later, inside the tent, we zipped into our sleeping bags and lay in the dim glow of the night. I stayed awake far longer than I should have, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me. The nylon walls felt close, the forest alive with insects and rustling leaves, and in that darkness I wondered just once what it would feel like to stop pretending. But I didn't. Not yet. That was the first night, the night that quietly set everything else in motion, though I had no idea at the time. The next morning felt different. The forest had its own rhythm, birds singing somewhere above, branches shifting with the breeze, the stream murmuring nearby. I woke to sunlight filtering through the tent, warm and golden, painting soft lines across Ethan's face as he stirred. For a moment I simply watched him. His breathing was slow and even, his lashes resting against his skin. It was the kind of sight I told myself friends weren't supposed to notice, but I couldn't help it. When he finally opened his eyes, I quickly looked away and fussed with my sleeping bag zipper like it needed urgent attention. "Morning," he mumbled, voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I echoed, trying to sound casual, ready for day two. "Always," he said, stretching his arms until his shirt lifted just enough to reveal a sliver of skin at his waist. I forced my eyes elsewhere, pretending the tent fabric was suddenly fascinating. We packed quickly, powered by instant coffee and granola bars, then headed out onto the trail. It was steeper that day, narrow ridges, dense pines, sunlight cutting through the canopy in shifting beams. Sweat gathered on my forehead as we climbed, but I refused to fall behind. Ethan hiked with effortless grace, as if the forest shaped itself around his stride. I tried to focus on the scenery, but my eyes kept returning to him. Halfway up he slowed and glanced back. "You good?" "Yeah," I said, breathing harder than I wanted to admit. "Just appreciating the view," he teased, wiping sweat from his brow. Flattering, didn't know I was part of the landscape. Heat rushed to my face, I stumbled over my words. "I meant the mountains, the valley, you know what I mean." His smirk widened, but he let it drop. I silently thanked the universe. When we reached the overlook, the sight stole whatever breath I had left. The valley stretched below us in sweeping layers of green and gold, rivers glinting like silver under the afternoon sun. Ethan stood at the edge, hands on his hips, taking it all in. "Worth it?" he asked. "Yeah," I whispered, though I wasn't talking about the view. We lingered there for a long time, sharing a quiet that felt heavier than the silence on the trail. My thoughts twisted in circles, circling the same truth I had buried for years. Being alone with him like this, no distractions, no noise, was pulling everything I'd hidden straight to the surface. Eventually, we moved on, descending toward a small clearing where we'd set up camp for the night. Evening settled around us, cool and calm. By the time the tent was pitched and wood was gathered, the first stars had appeared above the treetops. The fire crackled softly, its glow cast warm, shifting shadows across Ethan's face. He sat cross-legged, poking the flames with a stick, the orange light softening every line of his expression. I sat across from him, unable to stop staring, the way the fire sculpted him out of light and dark, impossible to ignore. We ate quietly, sharing packets of instant rice and jerky before slipping into one of our usual rhythms, stories from college, late-night disasters, the times we got lost driving home from parties. We laughed until the fire burned low and only embers remained. Then, without warning, the conversation shifted. "You ever think about where we're headed?" I asked, surprising both of us. He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Life, I said, careers, relationships, whether we're actually happy or just going through the motions. Ethan stared into the fire for a long time before answering. Yeah, he said quietly, more than I admit. The honesty in his voice tugged at something deep inside me. And I don't know, he continued. Sometimes it feels like I'm waiting for something or someone, but I couldn't tell you what. His words hit me like a stone to the chest. My heartbeat stumbled. Was he talking about me? Or was I hearing what I wanted to hear? The silence that followed felt heavy and charged. I wanted to confess everything, the years of quiet feelings, the truth I kept locked down, but fear held me in place. What if I ruined everything? What if I lost him? As if sensing the tension inside me, Ethan reached for the pot to refill his cup. His hand brushed mine, just a brief, accidental touch, but it sent a sharp spark through me. I froze, and for a fraction of a second, so did he. His hand lingered, not long, not obvious, but long enough to notice. His jaw tightened, his eyes flicked up to meet mine. For one heartbeat, one impossible heartbeat, I thought maybe he felt it too. But then he cleared his throat, pulled back, and busied himself with the pot, pretending nothing had happened. Neither of us mentioned it. The fire burned lower, the woods around us sinking deeper into darkness. Shadows moved across the trees, across Ethan's face, and across the thin space between us. I sat there with my heart racing, words caught in my throat, the weight of everything unspoken pressing heavier with every minute. Eventually, we crawled into the tent. Outside, the night hummed with crickets and rustling leaves. Inside, the space felt impossibly small. Our sleeping bags lay side by side, barely inches apart. I stared up at the nylon ceiling, listening to Ethan's breathing, close, steady, too close. My mind replayed every glance, every brush of his hand, every unfinished thought from the night. Sleep refused to come. All I could think about was the possibility, the frightening, exhilarating possibility that I wasn't alone in what I felt. But until one of us spoke the truth, it remained only that, a possibility. And possibilities, I was learning, could be the heaviest burden of all. The morning of our third day in the woods began with quiet skis and air so still it felt like the forest was holding its breath. We woke slowly, climbing out of the tent with stiff muscles but lighter spirits. Breakfast was simple, powdered oatmeal and coffee warming over the fire, but with Ethan sitting across from me, steam rising from his cup, it felt almost luxurious. "You think we'll make the ridge by sunset?" I asked, brushing crumbs off my lap. Ethan squinted at the tree line, tilting his head in that thoughtful way he always did. "If we keep a good pace, yeah, it's not too far. And if we do?" He smiled, "Then we set up camp early, it's not like we're on a timer." I nodded, letting his calm steadiness settle me the way it always did. That was Ethan, grounded, patient, never rushed. But beneath that calm I had started to sense something else. The way his eyes lingered on me a little too long. The way he shifted closer when we sat by the fire. The way his hand brushed mine and didn't feel accidental. We packed and headed out, weaving through switchbacks and narrow trails. Clouds began to gather overhead, thick, heavy, but we didn't notice at first. We were too caught up in our conversation, debating movies, laughing about old college memories, filling the climb with moments that felt easy and familiar. But by afternoon, the air changed. The forest grew too quiet, as if even the birds sensed what was coming. A cool wind brushed the sweat on my neck. Ethan glanced up. "Storm's rolling in," he said. I looked up too. Dark clouds were piling fast, swallowing the sun and turning the sky into something heavy and threatening. "How bad?" I asked. "Bad enough we should set up early." His tone shifted, clipped, focused. He always got like that when things turned serious. We picked up our pace, searching for flat ground, but the trail narrowed, boxed in by rocks and trees. The first drops of rain hit, cold, heavy, tapping against leaves. Then thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to shake my chest. "Here," Ethan shouted, pointing to a small clearing. We dropped our packs and scrambled to pitch the tent. Rain poured harder, soaking us before we even staked the corners. My fingers slipped on the wet poles, but Ethan's hands were steady and sure. In what felt like seconds and hours at the same time, the tent was up. We dove inside, dragging our gear with us just as lightning tore across the sky and thunder rolled through the valley. Inside, everything felt chaotic. The nylon walls shook under the wind, rain hammered the tent, and the air smelled of wet earth, damp clothes, and adrenaline. We sat there dripping and breathless while the storm raged only a few feet away. Could be worse, Ethan said, half laughing, though his eyes still flicked toward every flash of lightning. Really? I asked, shivering, because this feels pretty close to rock bottom. He smirked, his damp hair plastered to his forehead. Rock bottom would be no tent. Fair point, I admitted. We laughed, but the sound vanished under the storm. Thunder boomed again, closer, and I flinched before I could stop myself. Ethan noticed. You cold? He asked. A little, I said, hugging my arms around myself. My shirt clung to my skin, uncomfortable and drenched. Without a word, Ethan unzipped his sleeping bag and opened it wide. Come here, body heat's the fastest way to warm up. My heart nearly stopped. I tried to play it cool, but my voice came out uneven. You sure? Yeah, unless you want hypothermia. He shifted, making room without hesitation. Swallowing hard, I slid closer, easing into the warmth of his sleeping bag. Our shoulders touched first, then our arms, and then, as the nylon rustled around us, the full length of our bodies pressed together. Heat spread from him instantly, driving out the chill, but it did nothing to steady the storm inside me. The air felt too small, too charged. Every nerve in my body was suddenly aware of every point of contact, his arm along mine, his breath brushing my cheek, his leg pressed against my thigh. We sat quietly, listening to the storm tear across the forest. Rain hammered the tent, thunder rolled through the ground, but all I could hear was the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me. After a long time, I whispered, "You ever feel like we're different out here?" Ethan turned slightly, his face inches from mine in the dim light. Different how? Like everything's clearer, simpler. Like the things we never say in the city feel closer. His eyes searched mine, steady and unreadable. For a moment, I thought he would answer. I thought he might finally name the thing that had been hovering between us. But lightning flashed, washing the tent in bright white, and he looked away. Yeah, he said quietly, I know what you mean. Silence settled again, full, heavy, alive with everything we weren't saying. My heartbeat was so loud I wondered if he could hear it. A hard gust of wind rattled the tent, and instinctively I shifted closer. Ethan's arm moved around me without hesitation, steadying me. It wasn't playful. The rest of the day passed in a kind of quiet bliss, soft, steady like the calm after a storm that had both shaken us and rebuilt something in its wake. We walked in easy rhythm, the trail still damp beneath our boots, our fingers brushing or linking without hesitation now. Every small touch felt new and familiar at the same time, as if we had finally stepped into the version of ourselves we were always meant to be. Sometimes we talked, light conversations about the trail, about coffee, about nothing important. Other times we fell into silence, the good kind, where every breath felt shared. When we stopped to drink water near a fallen log, Ethan bumped his shoulder against mine, a quiet grin tugging at his mouth. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, ridiculous for someone who had spent the morning kissing him, but everything felt sharper now, realer. By late afternoon, the sky had fully cleared, leaving streaks of gold light threading between the trees. The world felt washed clean, so did I. You tired? He asked as we reached a ridge overlooking the valley below. A little, I admitted, but it's worth it. Ethan stepped close beside me, so close our arms touched from shoulder to wrist. He didn't speak right away. He just looked out at the view, then at me, with that same steady, grounding warmth I'd always depended on, but now colored with something deeper. You okay? He asked softly. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Yes, more than okay. His smile deepened, slow and quiet and sure, like the sunrise after a long night. For a moment, neither of us moved. The breeze stirred through the pines, carrying the scent of rain and earth. My chest felt full, too full, almost, and before I could second-guess myself, I reached for his hand again. He took it instantly, holding it like he'd been waiting years to do it. What happens when we get back? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Ethan squeezed my fingers, not hard, just enough to anchor me. We figure it out, he said, together. The word settled between us, gentle and certain. Together. We stood like that as the sun dipped lower, painting the valley in orange and pink. The storm had changed the forest, but it had changed us too. Maybe it had forced us to stop running from something that had always been there. When we finally turned to head down the trail, Ethan didn't let go of my hand. And for the first time, I didn't want him to. only the beginning of something neither of us had expected but both of us had been moving toward for years. In the days that followed, life didn't magically become easier. The city was loud again, busy, demanding, emails piled up, messages buzzed on our phones, responsibilities returned like they'd just been waiting in the hallway for us to walk back through the door. But something in me had shifted, something in him had too. That first night home, we didn't make big promises or try to force some perfect version of whatever we were becoming. Instead, Ethan texted me a simple home, and when I answered yeah, he replied with just, "Can I come up?" He didn't knock dramatically or show up with flowers. He just stood there in my doorway, hair still a little messy from the drive, hands in his pockets, looking at me like the world finally made sense. "Hi," he said, soft and nervous. "Hi," I echoed, feeling that same flutter in my chest I'd felt in the tent, by the fire, on the trail, everywhere. For a moment, we just looked at each other, two people who had spent years pretending not to see what was right in front of them. Then he stepped forward slowly, giving me time to pull back if I needed to. I didn't. His arms went around me, warm and familiar in a completely new way, and I let myself sink into him. The hug lasted longer than it needed to, longer than any excuse could justify. When he pulled back, he didn't go far. His forehead brushed mine, his voice was barely a whisper. "Still good?" he asked. "Still us?" I nodded. "Still us." "And more?" he asked. I smiled. "Yeah, more." We spent that evening on my couch, legs tangled, talking about nothing and everything. About work, about plans, about what us might look like in the real world. He kept reaching for my hand like he couldn't quite believe it was allowed now. I kept leaning into his shoulder like I'd been waiting years to. When he finally kissed me goodnight, slow, certain, unhurried, it felt different from the trailhead kiss. That one had been a promise. This one felt like the start of a life. Over the next weeks, we didn't rush anything. We didn't need to. We learned each other in new ways, familiar and unfamiliar at once. He'd show up after work with takeout. I'd find excuses to pass his office. We'd cook together, laugh too loudly in public, fall asleep during movies, take long walks at night just to be near each other. Every touch felt like a small confirmation. Every kiss like the next chapter unfolding. And sometimes, lying with my head on his chest while he traced absent circles on my back, I thought about that night in the storm, the moment his arm tightened around my waist, the breath he let out against my neck, the lightning that lit up the tent like a revelation, and I knew. We hadn't fallen in love in the woods. We had simply stopped hiding it there. The storm hadn't created anything new. It had only stripped away what was in the way, the fear, the hesitation, the silence. It had left us bare, honest, finally brave enough to meet each other where we'd always been. And now, every morning I woke up knowing that the version of my life I'd stepped into, that, after the tent chapter, was one I no longer had to face alone. Ethan was there. Beside me, with me, choosing me. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was choosing myself too.